Good afternoon everybody and welcome to the stream. I'm Robert from the El Magnifico Games channel, and today we are going to continue with our usual Wednesday poetry and riddles. So, starting where we left off last week, let's begin with a rereading of The Phoenix and the Turtle, and then we'll move on to some poems that we haven't seen yet. So, The Phoenix and the Turtle. Let the bird of loudest lay on the sole Arabian tree herald sad and trumpet be, to whose sound chaste wings obey. But thou shrieking harbinger, foul procurer of the fiend, augur of the fever's end, to this troop come thou not near. From this session interdict every fowl of tyrant wing, save the eagle, feathered king. Keep the obsequy so strict. Let the priest in surplice white, that defunctive music can, be the deaf divining swan, lest the requiem lack his right. And thou, treble-dated crow, that thy sable gender makest, with the breath thou givest and takest, amongst our mourners shout thou go. Here the anthem doth commence, love and constancy is dead, Phoenix and the turtle fled in a mutual flame from hence. So they loved as love in twain, had the essence but in one, two distincts, division none, number therein love was slain. Hearts remote, yet not asunder, distance and no space was seen, twixt the turtle and his queen, but in them it were a wonder. So between them love did shine, that the turtle saw his right, flaming in the phoenix's sight, either was the other's mine. Property was thus appalled, that the self was not the same, single nature's double name, neither two nor one was called. Reason, in itself confounded, saw division grow together, to themselves yet even neither. Simple words so well compounded, that it cried, how true a twain seemeth this concordant one. Love hath reason, reason none, if what parts can so remain. Whereupon it made this threen, to the phoenix and the dove, co-supremes and stars of love, as chorus to their tragic scene. Beauty, truth, and rarity, grace and all simplicity, here enclosed in cinders lie. Death is now the phoenix's nest, and the turtle's loyal breast to eternity does the rest. Leaving no posterity, 'twas not their infirmity, it was married chastity. Truth may seem but cannot be, beauty brag but 'tis not she, truth and beauty buried be. To this urn let those repair that are either true or fair, for these dead birds sigh a prayer. Interesting little poem there with a novel conceit. Oh yes, Jenny, where it refers to a turtle, it's referring to a turtle dove, which is a type of bird that has historically and to this day been associated with love. Although I grant you that nowadays we wouldn't usually use the abbreviation turtle, since you might confuse it with the shelled reptile. This is a turtle dove. Anyway, yeah, so let's move on to sonnets. Jenny says, okay, thank you. So turtle in this poem symbolises a kind of bird, which is the symbol of love. Yes. And the choice of the phoenix is very interesting as well, given that it's a type of bird which, according to mythology, spontaneously combusts upon death, leaving ashes behind, but from those ashes its young hatch. And so in a sense it's a sort of symbol of rebirth, possibly even reincarnation. And the conceit of this poem is it seems to be about a turtle dove, which symbolises love, and a phoenix, which symbolises rebirth, that have fallen deeply in love, and their love is obviously could be viewed as being unnatural since they're of a different species, and yet their love is true and honest, and it deals with concepts such as the death of true love. Where was it? Here we go. Truth may seem but cannot be. Beauty brag but 'tis not she. Truth and beauty buried be. So, although it may be that some of this is going over my head, but it seems to me that there is at least some suggestion that these two birds were ostracized for their love, and that may have contributed to their deaths. Although perhaps I'm or perhaps some of that is just my own interpretation. Anyway, that was the one we finished off on last week. So as I say, we appear to be moving on to a series of poems by Shakespeare that are just entitled sonnets. I'm not sure if these are his actual no, I doubt it. Because he does have a series of sonnets that are numbered, doesn't he? As in, that is their actual name. Or am I just mistaken? Yeah, so just for reference, I searched Sonnet 4 on Wikipedia, and the page is Sonnet 4 is one of the 154 sonnets written by the English playwright and poet William Shakespeare. It is a procreation sonnet within the fair youth sequence. So yes, he ended up publishing a series of sonnets which are now just known by their number. I'm not sure whether the sonnets here that we see numbered 1 to 20 are actually going to be those same sonnets, or if this is just a series of sonnets that he wrote that the anthologist has just put together and numbered independently. I suppose the easiest way to check would be to look up Sonnet 1. That wasn't very useful. Really? Does that not work? Sonnet 1? There we go. So Sonnet 1 should be, from fairest creatures we desire increase, and instead it shall I compare thee to a summer's day. So no, the numbers given here aren't the official numberings of his sonnets. This is clearly just a selection that the anthologist put together. So, let's get into it, shall we? So, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair some time declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So, what do we have here? Looks like iambic pentameter, I think. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Yes. I think that's iambic pentameter. Rhyming is alternate. Except for the final two lines, which are a rhyming couplet. How many lines do we have in total, actually? We have 14, don't we? Which might suggest an octave and a sexane, if I'm remembering those names correctly. But that would imply that this is a type of... No, that is the structure of a sonnet, isn't it? Oh, a sestet was the one I was thinking of. Sorry, I should probably be showing this page, shouldn't I? As I go through it. Prosodically, Surrey is more adept at composing in iambic pentameter, and his sonnets are written in what has come to be known anachronistically as Shakespearean measure. This version of the sonnet form, characterized by 3 alternately rhymed quatrains terminating in a final couplet, A B C D E F G G, became the favourite during Elizabethan times when it was widely used. So yes, indeed, that is what we're seeing. This all figures... Ooh, I apologise. In other words, we are just looking at a Shakespearean sonnet here. As the Wikipedia page points out, Shakespeare did not invent this sonnet form, but the fact that this form ended up being named after him should tell you something about how strongly associated his work is with it. So that means I probably don't need to look at the structure of the other ones much at all, since they'll all be Shakespearean sonnets, I should imagine. So the main takeaways are iambic pentameter, and we have 3 quatrains of alternate rhymes followed by a rhyming couplet. So, as for meaning, let's go through it one line at a time. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So it poses a question. Thou art more lovely and more temperate. So he does so and points out that the subject of the poem is much lovelier than a summer's day. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's leaf have all too short a date. So he raises complaints about the nature of summer. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his golden complexion dimmed. Some more complaints about summer. Although it is interesting to describe the sun as the eye of heaven. That's some interesting imagery there. And every fair from fair some time declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. And every fair from fair sometimes declines. So things that are fair cease to be fair. I assume he's still talking about days at this point within summer. By chance or nature's changing course untrimmed, but thy eternal summer shall not fade. Now this is starting to follow the form that the Wikipedia page was talking about, where you have a octave which introduces a question, and then a what was it called? I just looked it up and I've forgotten already. A sestet, which answers it. Now in this case, I wouldn't say that this is quite a question and an answer structure, but there's certainly a marked change in the poem at that point in terms of its character, whereby the subject matter changes, in this case from summer, the one thing that was under comparison, to the subject of the poem to the other, and if anything it's perhaps a little more confident. Previously the poem had been talking about things that we knew to be true by experience, where now it's making confident predictions about the future. So where were we? But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. I wonder what it means by owest, though. Nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Is owest just the past tense of owe, an archaic past tense? Second person singular, simple present form of O. Second person singular. So that would be, you would say you owest. Yeah, it does sound like it's saying that they owe fairness, which I don't quite follow. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. Beautiful imagery there. When in eternal lines to time thou growest. That's interesting. When in eternal lines to time thou growest. What are the eternal lines to which he's referring to? I'm not sure. See, since the... Oh, these are the eternal lines, of course, the poem itself, as in written lines. When in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. So in other words, I've written a poem about you, and this, in a sense, is your immortality. People in hundreds of years will still know of you and talk about how beautiful you were because I have written this poem. It's quite a clever conceit, but it also seems like quite a... what's the word? Not stereotypical, that's different. Quite a cliche conceit. But to be fair, I don't know if it was cliche when it was written, because it could be that Shakespeare himself was the originator of this conceit, or it may not be. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's what I can gather about the meaning of the poem. If you'd like to discuss it in any more detail, or have anything to add, or anything you'd like to discuss, please leave a comment in chat. And we will move on to the next one. And as I say, we won't focus on the form of the poems very much now because we're expecting them all to be Shakespearean sonnets, so not a lot of point. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising, from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate, for thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. So again, we see a marked change in the poem between the octave and the sestet. The start of the poem is talking about how the speaker often envies other people and how much better their lot in life seems to be. And then the sestet finally concludes that, well, actually, when I think of you and what your love means to me, I no longer feel envious of those other people, and I wouldn't swap my place even with a king. If it would mean that I would lose your love. Which is very loyal of them. Very sweet. Yeah, let's move on. I think we can probably get through these next ones quite quickly. But again, if any of this you would like to discuss in more detail or have any comments to make, please leave them in chat and I will read them shortly. When to the sessions of sweet silent thought I summon up remembrance of things past, I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought, and with old woes new wail my dear time's waste. Then can I drown on an eye unused to flow, for precious friends hid in death's dateless night, and weep afresh love's long since cancelled woe, and moan the expense of many a vanished sight. Then can I grieve at grievances forgone, and heavily from woe to woe tell o'er the sad account of fore bemoaned moan, which I knew pay as if not paid before. But if the while I think on thee, dear friend, all losses are restored and sorrows end. So that was interesting, because perhaps I missed it, but I didn't see a marked change from the octave to the sestet in this case. It was actually the rhyming couplet at the end that caused the shift in character. Specifically, most of the poem up till then had been talking about how the speaker would dwell on the past, unhappy things in the past, dreams they never managed to achieve, love that never worked out, and various other grievances that they experienced over their life. And then right at the end it concludes, but when I think of you, my friend, suddenly it doesn't seem to matter anymore. Which is very sweet, especially since, as far as I can tell, this one isn't about romantic love either. It's platonic love between friends. So, let's keep going. Thy bosom is endeared with all hearts, which I, by lacking, have supposed dead. And there reigns love and all love's loving parts, and all those friends which I thought buried. How many a holy and obsequious tear have dear religious love stoled from mine eye, an interest of the dead, which now appear, but things removed that hidden in thee lie. Thou art the grave where buried love doth live, hung with the trophies of my lovers gone, who all their parts of me to thee did give, that due of many now is thine alone. The images I loved I view in thee, and thou, all they, hast all the all of me. Interesting. I'm just going to quickly double check the meaning of obsequious. I'm pretty sure that's the second time we've come across it tonight, and I'm pretty sure it's not the first time I've looked it up on stream. I just want to double check. Excessively eager and attentive to please or obey instructions, fawning, subservient, servile. Okay. I have to try and remember that this time. Oops. Did it again. So, thy bosom is endeared with all hearts, so everyone loves you, which I by lacking have supposed dead. See, to me that sounds like it's saying it sounds like it's saying because you aren't dear to my heart, I supposed your bosom dead, but that doesn't make sense, so I feel like I'm misinterpreting that. Thy bosom is endeared with all hearts, which I, by lacking, have supposed dead. Oh, by lacking your bosom, so I assume that means by not being close to you, I have supposed that my heart is dead. I got those the wrong way round. That makes sense. So in other words, I think he's saying, because you're not close to me, or when you're not close to me, I feel like I'm dead. Which seems a little melodramatic, but you expect that of poetry, often. And there reigns love, and all love's loving parts, and all those friends which I thought buried. I think they're talking about their heart. I think they're saying that in their heart reigns love. And that's where their friends are buried. Oh, all their friends are there, who they assumed buried. How many a holy and obsequious tear have dear religious love stole from mine eye. So in other words, holy and obsequious or religious love has caused me to cry for holy or obsequious reasons. I wonder what he means by an obsequious tear. A tear that is excessively eager and attentive to please or to obey an instruction. Obedient, Of or pertaining to obsequies. Funereal, that makes more sense. Okay. The third meaning. Of or pertaining to obsequies. Yes, funeral rites. So I think that's referring to the fact that a lot of people they loved has passed on. An interest of the dead, which now appear, but things removed that hidden in thee lie. An interest of the dead, which now appear, but things removed that hidden in thee lie. Oh, I see. The things that are removed are presumably the people that have passed on. And then they're saying that these things actually lie hidden in you. So where were we? Thou art the grave where buried love doth live, hung with the trophies of my lovers gone. So in you I find the love I used to find for others, is essentially what it's saying, who all their parts of me to thee did give. Oh, so I gave parts of me to them in a romantic sense, and they have passed them on to you. That dew of many now is thine alone. So that dew of many now is thine alone. So that which I owed them, I now only owe you. The images I loved I view in thee, and thou, all they, hast all the all of me. So yes, I think it's essentially saying that I see in you the same love that I saw of my lovers that have since passed on, and you've in a sense inherited my love and everything that I gave to them. It's an interesting one, because I don't think people would express themselves in that way now. I could be wrong, but it seems a bit... I don't think people are likely to take so kindly to being compared to other people in that way. You know, if you were someone's second partner after their first had passed on, would you feel happy if they said that they saw their old partner in you? Because that's what this poem essentially seems to be about. But it's an interesting one, no doubt. Again, we see a shift. Actually, we don't see a shift between the octave and the sestet. It's actually on the 7th, so the 8th line, that the shift takes place. The 8th verse, where it says, "But things removed that hidden in thee lie," because that's when the poem shifts from "I've been dwelling on those past" to I see them in you. Anyway, let's keep going. What is your substance, whereof are you made, that millions of strange shadows on you tend? Since every one hath every one shade, and you but one can every shadow lend. Describe Adonis, and the counterfeit is purely imitated after you. On Helen's cheek all art of beauty set, and you in Grecian tires are painted new. Speak of the spring and foison of the year. The one doth shadow of your beauty show, the other as your bounty doth appear, and you in every blessed shape we know. In all external grace you have some part, but you like none, and you for constant heart. So foison is plenty. Speak of the spring and plenty of the year. Okay. What's Grecian tires? Grecian, of course, means Greek. Particularly of ancient Greek culture, but not exclusively. That's interesting. So it says, and you in Grecian tires are painted new. So that must be as a noun. Oh, obsolete. Accoutrements. Accessories. Dress, clothes, attire. Okay, that makes sense. From Middle English tire, equipment. Aphatic form of attire. Okay, that makes more sense. Oh dear, I keep doing that. Where were we? So, one verse at a time. What is your substance whereof you made? So what are you made of? Millions of strange shadows on you tend. So, what are you made of such that lots of shadows appear all over you? Since everyone hath every one shade, and you but one can every shadow lend. So everyone has a shadow, only one, but you seem to be able to lend many shadows. It's not entirely clear to me what it means by that. It seems to be asserting that the subject of the poem still only has one shadow, but that they can contribute to many shadows, I think? Describe Adonis. That was a ancient Greek figure known for a young a complementary young male appearance and possibly adolescent, actually. I'd have to check. And the counterfeit is poorly imitated after you. Okay, so it's saying that you are far more like Adonis than Adonis was, essentially. All the things that we remember Adonis as being, you have more of. Which is a very highly complimentary way to describe a young man. In Greek mythology, Adonis was the mortal lover of the goddess Aphrodite. One day Adonis was gored by a wild boar during a hunting trip and died in Aphrodite's arms as she wept. His blood mingled with her tears and became the anemone flower. Aphrodite declared the Adonia festival commemorating his tragic death, which was celebrated by women every year in midsummer. During the festival, Greek women would plant gardens of Adonis, small pots containing fast-growing plants, which they would set on top of their houses in the hot sun. The plants would sprout but soon wither and die. Then the women would mourn the death of Adonis, tearing their clothes and beating their breasts in a public display of grief. The Greeks considered Adonis's cult to be of Near Eastern origin. Adonis's name comes from a Canaan. Why can't I say that? Canaanite word meaning lord, and the most modern scholars consider the story of Aphrodite and Adonis to be derived from the earlier Mesopotamian myth of Inanna, Ishtar, and Tammuz. In late 19th and early 20th century scholarship of religion, Adonis was widely seen as a prime example of the archetypal dying and rising god. His name is often applied in modern times to handsome youths of whom he is the archetype. So yes, that was Adonis. On Helen's cheek all art of beauty set, and new and Grecian tires are painted new. What is the connection between those two clauses? On Helen's cheek, all art of beauty set, so Helen had beautiful cheeks, I think that's essentially what it's saying, and you in Grecian tires, so you wearing Greek clothes, are painted new. I can't see the connection between the two clauses. I mean, the only way I could think of it would be if they were saying that Helen was very beautiful, but you in Greek clothing are equally so, and you are new, whereas she is ancient, but that's maybe a bit of a stretch. Speak of the spring and the foison of the year, so the plenty, the one doth shadow of your beauty show. The one doth shadow of your beauty show. What's doth? Third person singular, simple present form of do. The one doth shadow of your beauty show. Doth and dost are generally used as auxiliary verbs. Doeth and doest are generally used as main verbs. The one... I'm still not sure I fully follow. It would make more sense if it said the one shadow of your beauty show. Or does show. Perhaps that's what it's... Perhaps I don't understand the grammar, but that's what it says. The one shadow of your beauty does show. The one doth shadow of your beauty show. Yes, I think that's what it's saying. So when you speak of the spring and the plenty of the year, the one shadow of your beauty appears. The other as your bounty doth appear. The other as your bounty doth appear. And you in every blessed shape we know. Oh, I think it's saying that the spring is a shadow of your beauty, and the plenty of the year is your bounty? The second part I don't fully follow, but I think that's what it's saying. And you in every blessed shape we know. So in all things of beautiful shape, we can see something of you, is I think what it's saying. So extremely complimentary. In all external grace you have some part, but you like none you, for constant heart. So you're wonderfully beautiful in all these ways. But you don't have a constant heart, nor do you seek it in other people. I must say, it's an extremely intriguing poem, isn't it? Right, let's keep going. Although, as always, if you'd like to discuss any of that, please leave a comment. Oh, how much more doth beauty beauteous seem, by that sweet ornament which truth doth give. The rose looks fair, but fairer we it deem, for that sweet odour which doth in it live. The canker blooms have full as deep a dye as the perfumed tincture of the roses, hang on such thorns and play as wantonly, when summer's breath their masked buds discloses. But for their virtue only is their show, they live unwooed and unrespected fade, die to themselves, sweet roses do not sow, of their sweet deaths are sweetest odours made. And so of you, beauteous and lovely youth, when that shall fade, my verse distills your truth. I wonder if where it says vade, it means fade. I will look up vade, just in case that's a word. Oh, it is, and it means to fade or to vanish. Huh. Interesting. So, going through it a verse at a time. Oh, how much more doth beauty beauteous seem? Well, that's not a complete thought, so we'll carry on. By that sweet ornament which truth doth give. So how much more beautiful beauty seems with the thing that truth gives us. The rose looks fair, but fairer we deem. The rose looks fair, but fairer we it deem, for that sweet odour which doth in it live. Which I think is reasonably self-explanatory. The rose is wonderful, but it's even more wonderful because of its smell. The canker blooms have full as deep a dye as the perfumed tincture of the roses. Hang on such thorns and play as wantonly, when summer's breath their masked buds disclose. So the canker blooms are as lovely in appearance as the roses, and they also have similar thorns, and they play as in just as carefree a manner. What was wantonly again? Wasn't that sort of carefree, but in a potentially negative way? Undisciplined, unruly, not able to be controlled. Yes. Playful, sportive, merry or carefree. Lewd, immoral, sexually open, unchaste. I don't think it means that here, but worth remembering. Capricious, reckless of morality, justice, etc. Extravagant, unrestrained, excessive. So yes. And they bloom in summer, but for their virtue only is their show. They live unwooed and unrespected fade, die to themselves, sweet roses do not sow, of their sweet deaths of sweetest odours made. So, as wonderful as the canker blooms are, they have a fairly unrespected fate. And all down to the fact that they don't make the sweet odours that roses do. And so have you, beauteous and lovely youth. When that shall fade, my verse distills your truth. Oh, of course. So, the speaker is suggesting that this poem itself is, as to the subject of the poem, as the smell of a rose is to a rose. So in other words, it is the just as the beautiful odour of the rose makes it a far more beautiful thing and gives it a more respected demise, so too will the speaker's poetry do for the subject of the poem. That's quite a clever conceit, actually. Until we went through it bit by bit, that was actually lost on me. Anyway, let's keep going. Being your slave, what should I do but tend upon the hours and times of your desire? I have no precious time at all to spend, nor services to do, till you require. Nor dare I chide the world without end hour, whilst I, my sovereign, watch the clock for you, nor think the bitterness of absence sour, when you have bid your servant once adieu. Nor dare I question with my jealous thought, where you may be, or your affairs suppose, but like a sad slave stay and think of naught, save where you are how happy you make those. So true a fool is love, that in your will, though you do anything, he thinks no ill. Ooh, okay. I think overall this was a fairly self-explanatory one. The conceit here being that the speaker, who loves the subject of the poem, is in many ways equivalent to a slave serving their master. I can imagine that might be quite a questionable conceit these days, but there it is. But I do think it was interesting how between the first three quatrains and the final rhyming couplet, we appear to have a shift in person. The first 12 verses appear to be written in the first person, whereas the final two seem to be written in the second person. And it's also the only one that actually explicitly makes mention of love. Up till then, knowing the nature of poetry and Shakespeare's poetry and the poetry that we've just been reading, I fully expected it to be a conceit about love. But it's only those two verses at the end that actually confirm that for certain. And like I say, they're written in a different person. It almost pulls you back out of the scene a bit, doesn't it? As though we've just seen some characters acting. Well, I suppose I mean some actors playing some characters, and then suddenly the camera pulls back and we hear the narrator speaking. Though, of course, I'm describing this in rather modern terms, since they didn't have cameras back then. But they did have plays, and of course Shakespeare was a playwright. I wonder if that perhaps influenced his writing of this poem specifically. Interesting if true. Anyway, let's keep going. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves, or none or few, do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bear ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self, that seals up all in rest. In me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. This thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. Goodness me, that last verse was almost a tongue twister, wasn't it? Almost. Yes, I think this one is also quite self-explanatory. It seems to be... The speaker seems to be a more elderly figure, maybe a sickly figure, but one or the other. They do seem to be quite confident that they aren't going to be living much longer. And the point they're making that rather... Well, first of all, we have the conceit of the poem, which is to liken, I assume, old age, possibly poor health, to being equivalent to the seasons, in particular autumn. One's autumn years, if you will. And then the message of the poem seems to be that even though you see how... how would you put this? How far gone I am, you know, how... both how short a time I have left, but also perhaps how far I have fallen from my prime. Despite you seeing all that, it only makes you love me more, not less, because you want to make the most of the time that we still have together. Which is a very sweet thought. And not a bad conceit. Bit of an obvious conceit, perhaps a bit cliched, but still well done, in my opinion. So let's keep going. Farewell, thou art too dear for my possessing, and like enough thou knowest thy estimate. The charter of thy worth gives thee releasing, my bond in thee are all determinate. For how do I hold thee but by thy granting? And for that riches whereas my deserving, the cause of this fair gift in me is wanting, and so many patent back again is swerving. Thyself thou gavest, thy own worth then not knowing, or me to whom thou gavest it, else mistaking, so thy great gift upon misprision growing, comes home again, on better judgment making. Thus have I had thee, as a dream doth flatter, in sleep a king, but waking no such matter. Okay, I think I'm going to have to study this one more carefully. So, farewell, thou art too dear for my possessing. That seems... that could actually be interpreted multiple ways. On the face of it, it seems quite clear. It's a goodbye, and the goodbye is because they are too dear to be possessed. But, as I said, that's actually ambiguous. It could mean, for example, that it's too costly to maintain the relationship, or it could mean dear could be being used in the emotional sense, that somehow I care too much for you to possess you, which raises other questions. Unlike enough thou knowest thy estimate. I'm not sure what "and like enough" means, unless it means "and well enough." So well enough would mean approximately, but sufficiently approximately. So if you say I know something well enough, you mean okay, I may not know something to the greatest level of precision possible, but I can do whatever was the subject under discussion. I know it well enough. I assume that's what he means by "and like enough." And like enough thou knowest thy estimate. So now he's distinctively moved towards language of commerce. So we would then assume that where he's talking about "thou art too dear," he does mean in the monetary sense. An estimate in this case would be an estimate for the cost of something. So thy estimate would be an estimate for the cost of you yourself. The charter of thy worth gives thee releasing. I don't fully follow that. A charter, I believe, is a type of document of incorporation, I think. I believe a charter is the type of document that will be drawn up before a company is formed, or something like an expedition is undertaken. I believe it can also be something that's granted from a particularly politically powerful entity such as a monarch, in which case it not only would specify the terms of incorporation of some group, but also would grant them special powers. So it says the charter of thy worth gives thee releasing. I'm not sure what it means by gives thee releasing. It seems to be saying the document which defines your value gives you releasing. Not sure what that releasing means. My bonds in thee are all determinate. Okay, bonds sounds like stocks and shares. I didn't think they had that yet, though. Not in Shakespeare's time. I thought that was about 100 years later, starting with the Dutch. Those sort of financial instruments were developed. Clearly not. And what does determinate mean here? Like, has a definite value? Or does it mean something else? So those are some questions that we should look at. Right. I'll look in my physical dictionary. Let's first look for release and see if it's any help there, and then bonds. Very interesting that this poem so vehemently sticks to language of commerce. Release. In law, remit, surrender, make over to another. Debt, right, property. The charter of thy worth gives thee releasing. Does that mean that the Charter of your worth, that is a document that defines your worth, also gives you to yourself, making you a free person? Which perhaps is being used by the poet to say that the very thing that makes you valuable, or more generally wonderful, is also the thing that makes you a free spirit. It could also mean set free, liberate, deliver, unfasten. Issue for general exhibition, and so on. Release can also mean deliverance, liberation from trouble, sorrow, life, duty, confinement or fixed position, written discharge, receipt, legal conveyance of right or estate to another, document affecting this, handle, catch, etc. that releases part of machine, etc. Okay. I can't be sure, but I've got a feeling I may have been on the right lines there a moment ago. Right, let's look up bonds. Now, I'll tell you where I was mistaken before. I do think that stocks and shares were more modern than Shakespeare, not by much. A century at most, possibly only a few decades, but I think they were. But bonds, even though we now think of them as being a very similar financial instrument, needn't be. They are, in a legal sense, a lot more definite. They aren't trading on risk in quite the same way. I mean, they are trading on risk, but you don't need as complex legal machinery to make them work, because you don't need to worry about shared ownership of enterprises in the same way. So they're probably much more ancient, which is interesting. I hadn't considered that before. What does bond say? Thing restraining bodily freedom, imprisonment. That's a different type of bond. What else? Deed by which A binds himself and his heirs, etc., to pay a sum to B, and his governments or public companies documentary promise to pay borrowed money. Bind together, bricks, etc. That's different. Person who puts goods into bond. Binding stone or brick. Yep, different. Bond, Lee, confederation. Different. In slavery, not free. Archaic. As in a bondman, bondmaid, bond servant, bond service, bond slave, etc. That all makes sense and isn't what we're discussing here, I doubt. So, yeah, I think by bond they mean an agreement to pay someone a certain amount of money over time. So usually bonds would be backed either by a government or a large reliable company. And so, as I was saying, the concept of having an agreement where, for example, you say, okay, my government, I will give you £90 now, and now for the next 10 years you have to give me £10 a year. So in theory, as long as inflation doesn't go up too much, you'll be ahead, but they're getting money now, which they can use now for whatever they wish, and they only have to pay it back gradually over a long time. That could actually be a very old instrument. Because like I say, unlike stocks and shares, you aren't dealing with the muddy waters of having some enterprise owned by a potentially very large number of people, because that raises all sorts of difficult problems, which is probably beyond the realms of this stream to go into great details about, but suffice to say, I don't think that legal machinery had been sorted out until the latter half of the 17th century, as far as I recall, and I believe it was the Dutch that were first. I could be wrong about that. That's just my vague recollection. But that's why I was confused why Shakespeare would be talking about bonds. But like I say, now I think about it, it does actually make sense. So determinate. Let's look that up as well. Determine. Determinative, determination, determinate, limited, definite, distinct, finite, definitive. I feel like we need that expanded upon. I feel like it's in its commercial language actually saying something quite precise. Distinct, clearly defined, fixed, set, unvarying. That's probably what it means. I could be wrong, since I am just working this out on the spot. But I bet the difference is that you could have a bond which varies in value, or a bond of fixed value. So for example, you could have a bond that says I will give you £10 each year for the next 10 years, or you could have a bond that says I will give you say the value of £10 stone of wheat grain every year for 10 years. And then as the price of wheat goes up and down, of course, the value will fluctuate as well. That's my guesswork, but that would make sense from a financial perspective. So now we have to look at what role that's serving in the poem. So, farewell, thou art too dear for my possessing. Unlike enough thou knowest thy estimate. The charter of thy worth gives thee releasing. My bonds in thee are all determinate. No, I still can't reconcile it. Oh, hold on, I missed something. Obsolete, determined, or resolved upon. So perhaps that means concluded. I had bonds in you, now they have concluded. So say the 10 years has passed and we're all paid up. I thought it was probably something like that, but I just couldn't. I couldn't put it together. For how do I hold thee but by thy granting? Ooh. I feel that verse. That's clever. And meaningful. And for that riches where is my deserving? So I don't deserve you because you offer so much. The cause of this fair gift in me is wanting. So I haven't given you cause to give me such a gift, and so my patent back again is swerving. Right, what does he mean by patent? I'm pretty sure they had patents back then, although they were used for a slightly different purpose. Which again is a bit beyond the scope of this stream. But it could be that the word has another meaning. Patent, letters, open letter from sovereign, etc., conferring right, title, etc., sole right for a term to make, use, or sell some invention. Conferred, protected by this. Patent lever, conferred, patent log, elaborated rotary form of ship's log. Recording speed on dial fixed on taffrail, to which one has proprietary claim, such as might be patented, ingenious, well contrived, of door, etc., open, plain, obvious. Oh yeah, it can also mean plain and obvious as well. Like his guilt was patent, for example. Also, patent, government grant of exclusive privilege of making or selling new invention process so protected, sign that one is entitled to something, possesses a quality, etc., as a patent of gentility, patent office, from which patents are issued, patent roll, containing patents issued in Great Britain in a year, or obtain patent for invention. Oh, that's the verb sense, of course. So I've patented it. Would be an example sentence. So let's go back. And so my patent back again is swerving. Well, it doesn't mean obvious. Unless it means my patent back, which seems odd. So where were we? My patent back again is swerving. Maybe I should look up swerving. I mean, I feel like I know what that word means, but perhaps it has some other legal sense that I'm not aware of. swerve. Diverge from regular line of motion. Go off and change direction. Dodge. That's what I expected. Divergence from course. Swerving in motion. That's the only senses it has. Alright, let's check on Wiktionary then. To stray, to wander, to rove. To go out of a straight line, to deflect, to wander from any line prescribed or from a rule or duty, to depart from that which is established by law, duty, custom, or the like, to deviate. That's getting closer. To bend, to incline, to give way, to climb or move upward by winding or turning, to turn aside or deviate, to avoid impact of a projectile, to travel in a curved line, to drive in the trajectory of another vehicle, to stop it, to cut off, to go out of one's way, to avoid, to shun. If I see that type of person in the club, I just swerve him. So where were we? The cause of this fair gift in me is wanting, and so my patent back again is swerving. I'm missing the meaning there, I must say. I can't tell if that's a royal patent, continuing with the language of commerce, or if that means obviously, or in an obvious way, my back, as in the rear part of me is swerving. Thyself thou gavest thy own worth, then not knowing, or me to whom thou gavest it, else mistaking. So thy great gift upon misprision growing. Misprision. Misprision, law. Wrong action or omission, especially of treason or felony. Now restricted to concealment of one's knowledge of a treasonable designs, etc. Or archaically, contempt, failure to appreciate the value of. Ooh. Comes home again on better judgment making. Thus have I had thee, as a dream doth flatter. In sleep a king, but waking no such matter. As a dream doth flatter, in sleep a king. Okay, but waking no such matter. So I think it's essentially saying that when we first met, I didn't realise what a great gift you would be, and now that I have realised, and you've realised, I can't afford to keep you. You're just too wonderful. I've done nothing to deserve you. which is very sweet in its way. The conceit of using commercial and legal language is very interesting, especially since I think in at least one part, he does a very good job of making the language powerful, even though it's using a very formal lexicon. Something that would normally be considered stodgy language. I wish I could understand more of it. There are still parts of it that are open questions to me. But overall, I would say that one I found reasonably impressive. So let's keep going. Then hate me when thou wilt, if ever now. Now while the world is bent my deeds to cross, join with the spite of fortune, make me bow, and do not drop in for an after-loss. Ah, do not, when my heart hath scaped this sorrow, come in the rearward of a conquered woe, give not a windy night a rainy morrow, to linger out a purposed overthrow. If thou wilt leave me, do not leave me last, when other petty griefs have done their spite, but in the onset come, so shall I taste at first the very worst of fortune's might, and other strains of woe, which now seem woe, compared with loss of thee will not seem so. Interesting. Okay. So going through it a verse at a time. Then hate me when thou wilt, if ever now. So if you're ever going to hate me now. Now while the world is bent my deeds to cross, so while the world is against me, join with the spite of fortune, make me bow. So just join in with the misfortune I'm suffering, and do not drop in for an after-loss. Now that was interesting. See, it sounds to me, where he uses the phrase after-loss, as if he's coined this term to refer to a romantic engagement that comes after losing something. Whether that's referring to dropping in for some romantic contact after a relationship has notionally ended, or whether it's referring to making up after a falling out, or whether it's referring to trying to be romantic with someone with an end to cheering them up after they suffered greatly. I can't say with certainty, but it seems like one of those. I suspect the first one, actually, that it's referring to going back to someone after you've broken up with them. But I could be wrong. Ah, do not, when my heart has scaped this sorrow, come in the rearward of a conquered woe. Give not a windy night a rainy morrow, to linger out a proposed overthrow. Proposed. Is that similar to supposed? Intentional, deliberate. Ah. Having a purpose or aim determined. So, it's almost the opposite of suppose, in the sense that this is definite. This is purposeful. Not something that is being conjectured. So, where were we? So it talks about the after-loss, and it says, do not, when I've escaped this miserable fate, come back to me, essentially, giving life back to this already conquered woe. Do not, well, where it says, give not a windy night a rainy morrow, it means don't prolong the misery, to linger out a proposed overthrow. So, and to draw out this deliberate breaking up. If thou wilt leave me, do not leave me last, when other petty griefs have done their spite. But in the onset come, so shall I taste at first the very worst of fortune's might. Okay, so if you're going to leave me, do it first of all. Please don't wait till everything else has passed. So, the world seems to be against me. I'm having a terrible time. If you're going to leave me, just do it now. And other strains of woe, which now seem woe, compared with loss of thee, will not seem so. So all the terrible things that are going on to me will seem nothing compared to the loss of you. Seems to be what it's saying. So where it says, do not come in the rearward of a conquered woe, it sort of means don't compound the sorrow. Don't follow up this misfortune with another misfortune. Which he then expounds upon later to say, if you're gonna break up with me, do it now, not later. Again, I'm a little impressed. Like, it doesn't have the same ingenuity of language that the previous one had, I don't think. But it's very witty. It uses language in a very competent way to express clearly a particular thought and feeling. So yeah, I'm certainly impressed with it. Let's keep going. They that have power to hurt and will do none, that do not do the thing they most do show, who, moving others, are themselves as stone, unmoved cold, and to temptation slow, they rightly do inherit heaven's graces, and husband nature's riches from expense. They are the lords and owners of their faces, others but stewards of their excellence. The summer's flower is to the summer sweet, though to itself it only live and die. But if that flower with base infection meet, the basest weed outbraves his dignity. For sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds. Lilies that fester smell far worse than the weeds. Than weeds. Interesting. So, they that have power to hurt and will do none, that do not do the thing they most do show. See, it's the last bit that I find interesting, that they most do show. Because it suggests that they're showing people that they have the power to hurt, which seems peculiar to me. But perhaps it's more just a reference to the power that people hold, and the fact that they perhaps make their office and consequence no secret. Who moving others are themselves a stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow. They rightly do inherit heaven's graces, and husband nature's riches from expense. So this is quite clear. It's, I think anyway, it's expressing the fact that people who have the power to do harm but refrain from it, and who have the ability to influence people but are not unduly influenced, obviously, well, the poem would argue, obviously have the favour of God. I think what it's trying to describe is an individual who is strong, independent, and yet virtuous. They are the lords and owners of their faces, others but stewards of their excellence. So this is more compliments being piled on. Calling them lords and owners of their faces is interesting, because that might actually imply a degree of manipulous, a manipulative side, which I suppose, strictly speaking, isn't contradictory with being a virtuous person, depending upon circumstances, but is generally not a trait that nowadays we would consider a good one. Others but stewards of their excellence. So it's almost saying that these people are in complete these people are the centerpiece of life, and everyone else is just everyone else can only really be interpreted as forces that move between these people and support them. The summer's flower is to the summer sweet, though to itself it only live and die. Okay. I'm not sure where he's going with that, but that's interesting. The idea that a summer flower manages to make the summer more wonderful, but from the flower's perspective, whose existence isn't confined to only the summer, you know, it will grow in the spring, flower in the summer, and then wither in the autumn, for example. Perhaps it cannot see either the way it contributes to the summer, or perhaps to fully appreciate its own bloom, because it can only see a life and a death. I suppose that actually works hand in hand with the previous verses, with the flower and the summer acting as analogues for the stewards and the lords. But if that flower with base infection meet, the basest weed outbraves his dignity. For sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds. Lilies at Festus smell far worse than weeds. That seems to be suggesting that if one of these people that isn't in complete control of their lives ends up doing the wrong thing, then they have less dignity than those that were lowly born to begin with. I must confess, I don't fully grasp that. I feel like there is a well of meaning there which I am not quite reaching. Most of it, though, I think is very well put together, and like the previous poem, it uses language in a very precise way to get precise thoughts and feelings across. I just wish I could fully understand the last bit. I really, in retrospect, I really do like the summer's flower is to the summer sweet, though to itself it only live and die. I think that's a very interesting thought, and I think it stands on its own, but at the same time also helps to further expand and explore the ideas that have been presented in the previous verses. Interesting. Right, shall we keep going? How like a winter hath my absence been, from thee the pleasure of the fleeting year. What freezes have I felt, what dark days seen, what old December's bareness everywhere. And yet this time removed was summer's time, the teeming autumn big with rich increase, bearing the wanton burden of the prime, like widowed wombs after their lord's decease. Yet this abundant issue seemed to me but hope of orphans and unfathered fruit, for summer and its pleasures wait on thee, and, thou away, the very birds are mute. Or if they sing, 'tis with so dull a cheer, that leaves look pale, dreading the winter's near. Right, let's go through this one. How like a winter hath my absence been from thee, the pleasure of the fleeting year. How my absence from you has been like a winter of pleasure of the fleeting year, of the year. So being away from you has been like a barren winter of pleasure, or to pleasure. A barren winter for pleasure. What freezes have I felt, what dark days seen, what old December's bareness everywhere. So again, it's continuing this metaphor of being away from you and the seasons, in particular bitter winter. And yet this time removed was summer's time, the teeming autumn. Okay, hold on. And yet this time removed was summer's time. So I think it's just saying that without you there was no summer, although somehow that seems a bit redundant. Perhaps I'm missing something. The teeming autumn, big with rich increase, bearing the wanton burden of the prime. I wonder what they mean by the prime. I think it's fairly clear that there's a allusion here to an autumn harvest, and the fact that autumn is the time when things tend to be most plentiful. That's when the year's farming finally pays off. But what do they mean by the wanton burden of the prime? Where are we? Prime, state of highest perfection, as in the prime of life, manhood, etc. The best part of a thing, beginning, first age of anything. A canonical hour of the divine office, appointed to a first hour of day, i.e. 6 a.m. or sunrise. Archaic this time. Archaic golden number, prime number. It's not going to be from chemistry. Otherwise, a chief, most important, as prime agent, motive. First rate, especially of cattle and provision. Excellent, whence primely, primeness, primary, fundamental. Having no integral factors except itself and unity, so that's a prime number. Having no common measure but unity. Cost, mover, prime vertical circle, great circle of the heavens passing through east and west. Interesting. Points at horizon through zenith, where it cuts meridian at right angles. Prime Minister, we know what that is. Historic supply, firearm or ABS. I'm not sure what ABS stands for. With gunpowder for firing charge. Wet pump to make it start working. Equip person with information. Fill person with liquor. Cover wood with first coat of paint or with oil, etc. to prevent paint from being absorbed. of engine boiler, let water pass with steam into cylinder in form of spray. Well, it's not going to be that. So where were we? It was bearing the wanton burden of the prime. I still don't fully follow that. First in importance, degree or rank, first in time, order or sequence, first in excellence, quality or value, early blooming, being in the first stage. Could be blooming. Lecherous, lewd, lustful. Interesting. Is that as an adjective? Ah, we're looking for a noun. The first hour of daylight, the first canonical hour. The religious service offered to this hour, the early morning generally. Wanton burden of the prime. It's possible they associated the morning with a bountiful harvest. I'm not entirely sure why though. The earliest stage of something. The most active, thriving or successful stage or period. That's more likely. Because that could be used to describe the summer. When things are... where fruits are maturing. I think that's the most likely explanation. So, where were we? The teeming autumn, big with rich increase, bearing the wanton burden of the prime, like widowed wombs after their lord's decease. Goodness. I think that's an allusion to pregnant women after their husbands have died. I could be wrong. Yet this abundant issue seemed to me but hope of orphans and unfathered fruit. Oh, and that's why he set it up in such a... with such, dreadful imagery. Because he's found a way to make the bountiful harvest of the autumn seem bad. For summer and his pleasures wait on thee, or see it in a bad light, I suppose. For summer and his pleasures wait on thee, and though away the very birds are mute, or if they sing, 'tis with so dull a cheer, that leaves look pale, dreading the winter's near. So when you're away, so is summer. Which causes leaves to turn pale as they dread the winter. Again, this is well put together, in my opinion. I'm not sure it's quite got the same precision of language as the last two poems had, but it does make good use of conceits. Which it uses effectively, I think, to get the thoughts of the speaker across. Yeah, well, I certainly enjoyed it once I understood it. Let's keep going. From you have I been absent in the spring, when proud-pied April, dressed in all his trim, have put a spirit of youth in everything. That heavy Saturn laughed and leaped with him, yet nor the lays of birds, nor the sweet smell of different flowers in odour and in hue, could make me any summer's story tell, or from their proud lap pluck them where they grew. Nor did I wonder at the lilies white, nor praise the deep vermilion in the rose. They were but sweet, but figures of delight, drawn after you, you pattern of all these, of all those. Yet seemed it winter still, and you away, as with your shadow I with these did play. it seems to be... It seems to be expressing the same feelings as the previous poem, but it's doing so mostly with different conceits and imagery. There is some allusion to the seasons here, but nowhere near as much. I think he did a good job of expressing what would have even been at this time an old cliche. One, of likening women to flowers, and two, of choosing the colours of white and red, you know, snow white skin and bright red lips. In the verses, nor did I wonder at the let me try again. Nor did I wonder at the lilies white, nor praise the deep vermilion in the rose. They were but sweet, but figures of delight, drawn after you, you pattern of all those. So suggesting that you were the first and the archetype of those flowers. Prior and primary, if you will. It's good. I was going to look up a couple of words, wasn't I? Proud pied. Oh, having two or more colours, especially black and white. Yeah, we've looked this up before, I'm sure. When proud pied April. That's interesting. Why pied for April? Why is April considered pied? And I wonder if the implication is two colours, that April itself is heavily associated with two colours, or if it means many-coloured. Interesting. And referring to April as proud as well. I feel like there are cultural allusions here that are going over my head. Dressed in all his trim, have put a spirit of youth in everything. So April's considered youthful? That heavy Saturn laughed and leaped with him. Why Saturn? Why Saturn? Saturn was a god in ancient Roman religion and a character in Roman mythology. He was described as a god of time, generation, dissolution, abundance, wealth, agriculture, periodic renewal and liberation. Saturn's mythological reign was depicted as a golden age of abundance and peace. After the Roman conquest of Greece, he was conflated with the Greek titan Cronus. Interesting. So perhaps it could be the association of periodic renewal and liberation, and wealth and agriculture that's caused Mr. Shakespeare to choose Saturn as a particular mythological figure. Yet nor the lays of birds, nor the sweet smell of different flowers in odour and in hue, could make me any summer's story tell, or from their proud lap pluck them where they grew. Nor did I wonder at the lilies white, nor praise the deep vermilion in the rose. They were but sweet, but figures of delight, drawn after you, you pattern of all those. Yet seemed it winter still, and you away, as with your shadow I with thee did play. Very nice. Let's move on. Again, you know, if you want to discuss any of these more, if you have any comments or observations or anything like that, please leave a comment in chat and we will do so. Or rather, I will read it out and we can discuss, etc. Right, where was I? My love is strengthened, though more weak in seeming. I love not less, though less the show appear. That love is merchandised, whose rich esteeming the owner's tongue doth publish everywhere. Our love was new, and then but in the spring, when I was wont to greet it with my lays, as Philomel in summer's front doth sing, and stops her pipe in growth of riper days. Not that the summer is less pleasant now, than when her morning hymns did hush the night, but that wild music burthens every bough, and sweets grown common lose their dear delight. Therefore, like her, I sometimes hold my tongue, because I would not dull you with my song. Interesting. So essentially it's a poem explaining why the speaker no longer tries so hard to show his love, even though he still feels it. Essentially because he feels that excessive signalling of love can dull the effect. It can make it seem less special and possibly more false. Although with some lovely allusions to the summer, the growth of fruit, the nightingale. That's what the reference to Philomel is about. It's a good, competent poem in my opinion. So, moving on. To me, fair friend, you never can be old, for as you were when first your eye I eyed, such seems your beauty still. Through winter's cold have from the forest shook 3 summers' pride. Through beauteous springs to yellow autumn turned, in process of the seasons have I seen. Through April perfumes in 3 hot Junes burned, since first I saw you fresh, which yet are green. Ah, yet doth beauty like a dial hand steal from his figure, and no pace perceived. So your sweet hue, which methinks still doth stand, have motion, and mine eye may be deceived. For fear of which, hear this, thou age unbred, ere you were born was beauty's summer dead. Right, let's go through this one a verse at a time. To me, fair friend, you never can be old. That seems clear. For as you were when first your eye I eyed, so when I first saw you, such seems your beauty still. So you haven't changed. Through winter's cold have from the forest shook 3 summers' pride. Through beauteous springs to yellow autumn turned, in process of the seasons have I seen. Through April's perfumes in 3 hot Junes burned, since first I saw you fresh, which yet are green. So that's saying that 3 years has passed, although it does so with some lovely allusions to the seasons. And then at the end it asserts that you're as fresh as you ever were. Ah, yet doth beauty like a dial hand, I assume that means a sundial, steal from his figure, and no pace perceived. and no pace perceived. What does that mean? And yet doth beauty, like a dial hand, steal from his figure. From whose figure? His own? Yet doth beauty steal from his figure, and no pace perceived. See, I wonder if by no pace perceived they mean you can't see time progressing. Again, using this imagery of a sundial. But I don't understand what the steal from his figure illusion is, since we only seem to have one object, one subject under discussion at this point, and that's beauty. So your sweet hue, which methinks still does stand, have motion, and mine eye may be deceived. So I think what that's saying is, just as if you were to stare at a sundial all day, you wouldn't see it moving, because it moves so slowly. In a similar way, even though I feel like you haven't changed and you're just as lovely as ever, you probably are changing very slowly and my eye is being deceived. Which seems controversial. For fear of which, hear this, thou age unbred. Right, what do they mean by unbred? Or what does Mr. Shakespeare mean by unbred? No help there, it would seem. Let's try Wiktionary. Unbred, untaught or untrained, not born, not well bred, ill bred. Yes, the last one seemed, well, the last two seemed somewhat obvious. Untaught or untrained? For fear of which, hear this, thou age unbred. Ere you were born was beauty's summer dead. What was ere again? This is another one that I'm sure we've looked up several times before. At least once. Before, sooner than. At an earlier time. Ere you were born was beauty's summer dead. So before you were born, beauty's summer had died. So beauty was already in the decline. Oh, interesting. Apparently if you look up unbreed as a verb, you also get figuratively to unmake or destroy. That may make more sense, for fear of which, hear this. Thou age unbred. For fear of which your age destroyed. Possibly. Does that figure? Does it mean age as in a person's age, or does it mean age as in the age you live in? Like the present age, the modern age. So your sweet hue, which methinks still doth stand, have motion, and mine eye may be deceived. For fear of which, hear this, thou age unbred, ere you were born was beauty's summer dead. The only way I can figure it would be if he's saying something like, you're not getting older, it's just that beauty itself is in decline. Which is a fascinating interpretation if true, but I'm not convinced that I'm not misunderstanding. Anyway, we'd best move on to the riddles, hadn't we? So I think last week we must have finished off on 143. Long my small body lay in earthen bed, till the bright sun drew forth my tender head. Pleased with the warmth and nourished with the gleams, I stretched my trunk to meet the cheering beams. Extended far from small to great my name, a sacred simile became, for age, inexorable age, drew nigh. Cut down, dried up, and withered now I lie, my fruit torn from my body straight as stored. For man, that haughty, stern, devouring lord, these are my strength, in those my virtue lie. I live in these, although my body die. Then bruised and penned, immured in walls around, close pent I lie in liquid atoms drowned. Hence I arise, with greater strength supplied, perfect as silver in the furnace tried. I know no danger, for I fear no foe. To temperance I a kind indulgence show, but gluttons shall my dire resentment know. I bite the biter, and the stout oppose. I took the mighty Marlborough by the nose. Then, ladies, name the object of your fears, what taints the breath, and draws unpitied tears. Which I believe the answer was horseradish, if I remember correctly. Or was it mustard? No, mustard, I think. So let's look that up. Mustard, indeed. So let's move on to the first new riddle of the night. I'm a magician of stupendous fame, and the most powerful that e'er bore the name. A strong enchanted castle I do hold, that's now above 1,000 lustres old. Yet its foundation time could ne'er decay, nor yet the furious deluge wash away. At first a glorious front attracts your eye, built by the exactest rules of symmetry. All the first rooms are splendid, rich and neat, contrived for delicacy, ease and state. But in remoter lodgings slaves I keep, and fettered captives groan in dungeons deep. My fetters are invisible but sure, and commonly as long as life endure. Here is my citadel, secure I lie, and practise charms on all that travel by. My flattering promises all ranks ensnare, the wise, the great, the rich, the brave, the fair. They first approach my gates with eager joy, led by the pleasing curiosity, but viewing all the apartments the desire abates, and they as gladly would retire. But oh, a potent verbal spell retains, and holds them fettered in its magic chains. How many for admittance do implore, in vain, but for dismission thousands more. Well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Lustres. Luster sounds a lot like lustrous, doesn't it? Shine. The way in which a surface of any particular type of mineral reflects light differently from other minerals, which is helpful in telling minerals apart. A glass ornament such as a prism or cut glass, dangling beneath a chandelier, usually in clusters or festoons. A chandelier, particularly one decorated with glass lustres. So yes, that's interesting use of language here. They call something 1,000 lustres old. That's quite ingenious. Nope. I take it back. Alternative form of lustre, a 5-year period, especially historical in Roman context. Well, I don't know the origin of that. That may still be a particularly ingenious use of language. It's just not the author of this Riddles doing. 1,000 lustres old, so that would make it 5,000 years, which I think it's safe to say is old enough that it could be taken as the age of the world at the point of writing this. Because I don't think they had a good idea of how old the world was written around the turn of the 19th century. The only thing I can think of is something like a cut diamond as a symbol of wealth. Or more generally, a gem or a jewel. So let's see if I'm right. If you have a guess, by all means, leave a comment in chat. Hymen. In what sense? Marriage, possibly? Because doesn't hymnal come from hymen, and it refers to singing related to marriage? The beautiful Mrs. R, whose name had not long been enrolled in the lists of hymen. Yes. So that's what it's referring to, marriage. I'm a magician of stupendous fame, and the most powerful that e'er bore the name. A strong enchanted castle I do hold, that's now above 1,000 lustres old. Yet its foundation time could ne'er decay, nor yet the furious deluge wash away. At first a glorious front attracts your eye, built by exactest rules of symmetry. All the first rooms are splendid, rich and neat, contrived for delicacy, ease and state. But in remoter lodgings slaves I keep, and fettered captives groan in dungeons deep. My fetters are invisible but sure, and commonly as long as life endure. Here is my citadel, secure I lie, and practise charms on all that travel by. My flattering promise all ranks ensnare, the wise, the great, the rich, the brave, the fair. They first approach my gates with eager joy, led by the pleasing curiosity, but viewing all the apartments, the desire abates, and they as gladly would retire. But oh, a potent verbal spell retains, and holds them fettered in its magic chains. How many for admittance do implore, in vain, but for dismission thousands more. Now I understand it, it is rather good, but I would say the biggest clue here was what was it? And commonly as long as life endure. That was the big clue. I'm not saying that none of the rest of it may have pointed you to marriage, but that was the only one that really patently did so. And obviously I missed a single line out of the entire riddle. And more generally, I suppose, just the references to promises and verbal spells, again suggesting some form of verbal binding, like a contract. Let's try another. My head is well furnished without you, will own, but to tell you the truth, for brains I have none. Yet like those who are obliged to their wits for their bread, what keeps my teeth going still comes from my head. My throat is but narrow, yet wide are my jaws. I eat without chewing, my teeth are like claws. As a child that is fed by its nurse, I ne'er eat, but when I've another prepares me my meat. 'Tis true she will taste when she feeds me, so let her, for oftener she does so, it goes down the better. Sorry music I make, yet a flute or a fiddle does not turn to account half so much as this riddle. Didn't follow the last bit. Yet a flute or a fiddle does not turn to account half so much as this riddle. What does to turn to account mean? Turn to account. Use well, take advantage of. Interesting. Also turn to good account. Does not turn to account half so much as this riddle. My head is well furnished, without you will own. Oh, my head is well furnished without you will own. But to tell you the truth, for brains I have none. And yet, like those who are obliged to their wits for their bread, what keeps my teeth going still comes from my head. I mean, the first thing that occurs to me is something like a meat grinder for making, or a meat mincer, I suppose I mean. What else has teeth? Gears? My throat is but narrow, yet wide are my jaws. See, that suggests stuff being funneled in somewhere, which again makes me think of a mincer. I eat without chewing, my teeth are like claws. As a child that is fed by its nurse, I ne'er eat, but when I've another prepares me my meat. Again, seems to figure, 'tis true she will taste when she feeds me. So let her, for oftener she does, it goes down the better. Oh, is turn to account a pun? Because it could mean literally to use well or take advantage of, but they may mean literally turning something, as in a... oh, what's it called? Not a lever, that's different. The proper name escapes me, but a rod that you turn to manually provide power. Again, which would figure with a mincer. Let's check. A linen wheel. What the deuce is a linen wheel? Oh, could that be? No, apparently not. I was going to suggest, could it be a old name for another thing I've forgotten the name of, oh, it was on the tip of my tongue. A mangle for clothing. I can't find on Wikipedia an exact account of what a linen wheel is, although one of the top results of was a spinning wheel. I still haven't found anything definite. I think it could be a spinning wheel for linen products. I still haven't found anything definite. Hold on, I might have found something. This appears to be a transcript associated with a photograph. I'm not sure what it's a transcript of, but it says, "This old woman has known how to spin ever since her own mother taught her when she was a little girl. The linen wheel itself is even older than its user, an inheritance from another generation, when quantities of flax were grown about Fier and something that isn't a word." I think that's probably supposed to be spinning. But a optical character recognition algorithm has failed on probably One of the chief cottage industries. So yes, a linen wheel is probably a spinning wheel for linen products. So where were we? My head is well furnished without, you will own, but to tell you the truth, for brains I have none. Yet like those who are obliged to their wits for their bread, what keeps my teeth going still comes from my head. My throat is but narrow, yet wide are my jaws. I eat without chewing, my teeth are like claws. As a child that is fed by its nurse, I ne'er eat, but when I've another prepares me my meat. 'Tis true she will taste when she feeds me, so let her, for the oftener she does so, it goes down the better. Sorry music I make, yet a flute or a fiddle does not turn to account half so much as this riddle. Ah, okay. I actually have a vague memory of watching a video where someone was talking about a spinning wheel. I think it may have been in one of Jack Hargreaves' old documentaries. Well, I say documentaries, his TV programme, which was fell somewhere between light entertainment and documentary content. And I seem to remember something about having to lick something, not in a gross way, like licking your fingers before you did something or something along those lines. No, they had a bowl of water, that was it. They weren't licking. They had to wet their hand to do some part of the spinning process. I think it helped the fibres take on the proper shape as they were being spun or something like that, or was it? I think it was part of the process of feeding the fibres in to the spinning wheel, where you'd have to pull on it and so on to make sure it gets spun at the right thickness consistently, and for some reason a wet hand helped. In the program, I think they were using a bowl of water, but equally I could imagine someone licking their fingers for the same job, in which case that might explain the part that says, "'Tis true, she will taste when she feeds me, so let her, for the oftener she does so, it goes down the better." Goes down the better, meaning the threads will be more easily handled and ultimately taken up by the machine. So this does actually make sense now. It went over my head, but in retrospect it makes sense. And so where it says, "But when I've another..." Sorry, "As a child that is fed by its nurse, I ne'er eat, but when I've another prepares me my meat," that's figurative. Obviously it doesn't mean real meat. I say obviously, I mean, that's how I interpreted it initially, but it means that, as I say, in a figurative sense. And as I thought, the "does not turn to account half so much as this riddle" is a pun, because it is something that turns a lot. Right, so we'd probably better stop there. Thank you for coming, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I'll be streaming again on Friday, which will be more Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. I think it very likely I'll be doing my Saturday stream, although I'll give you a definite confirmation on Friday. My Monday stream will also be Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, as will the Saturday if it goes ahead. And then we're back round to Wednesday, which is my Poetry and Riddles stream. So, once again, thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed it, and good night.